Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinel Report. I am your host, Alex Newman. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful day that the Lord has made. It is March 24th, 2025, and we've got some very special guests lined up for you folks about what is happening to our nation, to our churches, so many unbiblical ideas proliferating, even in the church, and then finally some thoughts on how we fix it all. A little bit of news up front. We'll start like we do every day with a word from the Word. This comes out of 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17. I love this verse. It says, "Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." Folks, if you think you're going to restore freedom in this country without inviting the Spirit of the Lord back into this country, you're mistaken. It's not going to happen, never has happened, and never will happen. God is the author of freedom. You cannot have real freedom without the Spirit of the Lord. Remember that as we go about the hard work of exposing the tyrants and the evildoers and standing for truth, righteousness, and justice. Now, going right into the news, folks, we've got a lot going on. Trump has been keeping campaign promises. He has now released the most recent, or the remaining John F. Kennedy files in a massive document of over 63,000 of them. No smoking guns yet, but researchers are looking through it. We're learning about the self-preserving nature of the CIA and the deep state. One of the documents that was released highlights Mr. John Garrett Underhill, an intelligence agent from World War II, who was on a first-name basis with many of the top brass at the Pentagon. According to the newly declassified reports, the day after the assassination, Gary Underhill left Washington in a hurry. Later in the evening, he showed up at the home of a friend in New Jersey. He was very agitated. He said a small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination, and he was afraid for his life and would probably have to leave the country. Wow. Later, Underhill committed suicide in his apartment. So we'll bring you more updates as we find him. Andrew Mueller, Chief of Operations at Liberty Sentinel, also writer for The New American. He is doing a deep dive into some of this, so we'll have more as we get it. Now, last week, the president signed an executive order dismantling the U.S. Department of Education. I always get that wrong. In his speech before signing, he said he's going to try to return all these responsibilities back to the states. Check it out.
My administration will take all lawful steps to shut down the department. We're going to shut it down and shut it down as quickly as possible. It's doing us no good. We want to return our students to the states where just some of the governors here are so happy about this. They want education to come back to them, to come back to the states, and they're going to do a phenomenal job. You know, if you...
Yeah, and Trump also pointed out some of what's going on with our poor children, these victims of these government brainwash camps. Listen to this.
After 45 years, the United States spends more money on education by far than any other country, and spends likewise by far more money per pupil than any country, and it's not even close. But yet we rank near the bottom of the list in terms of success.
Yeah, folks, it's bad, as you know, if you watch this program regularly. Now, Chuck Schumer went on The View and shared a little bit about the Democratic Party's messaging, and he had some fun things to say about Americans who want to keep their own money. Check it out.
And you know what their attitude is? I made my money all by myself. How dare your government take my money from me? I don't want to pay taxes. Or, I built my company with my bare hands. How dare your government tell me how I should treat my customers, my the land and water that I own, or my employees? They hate government. Government's a barrier to people, a barrier to stop them from doing things. They want to destroy it. We are not letting them do it, and we're united.
Okay, good.
How dare they think that they built that, right? Government built that. Now hand over your money. How dare you think you should be able to keep the fruit of your labor? Chuck Schumer should have the fruit of your labor. He knows how to spend it better than you. Planned Parenthood and Ukraine. I mean, come on, guys, right? Now, a huge win for South Dakota, folks, earlier this month. Massive win. 3 of the key election bills passed, and they are now waiting for the governor's signature. Folks, this is really, really huge. The details on these are fantastic. But if all 3 of these end up in law, it's going to be very good for election security in South Dakota. Now, we've also got homosexual and transgender newborns. At least that's according to a weird questionnaire at the Inspira Health facilities in New Jersey. Parents are asked whether their newborn child identifies as male, female, transgender, male, I can't even say all this garbage, gender queer. Okay, yes, these are newborn babies, folks. And also, which of the following best describes your baby? Homosexual, bisexual, really? Prefer not to answer? Folks, if you didn't know, newborn babies can't identify as anything. They're newborn babies, okay? This is incredible, folks. State of New Jersey, also known as Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, we've got legislation to abolish the Federal Reserve being introduced in the House of Representatives and in the U.S. Senate. Folks, get over to jbs.org and contact your U.S. representative and your U.S. senator. Ask them to support and co-sponsor these really, really significant bills. The Federal Reserve has been the engine that has ripped off Americans, destroyed the middle class, and used our resources and our energy to destroy freedom around the world. Get involved, folks, and this is an easy starting point. Now, we've got a Florida Senate panel just voted to amend and pass a vaccine materials bill that's going to ban mRNA vaccines in fruits and vegetables. It's also going to ban certain toxic chemicals in the stuff you put on your face. So we're grateful to lawmakers in Florida. Over in Utah, they just passed 5 incredible bills on flags, fluoride, gold, and more. If Governor Cox signs these, it's going to be a huge development, folks. Some of the details on these are huge. No more LGBTQ flags at school. The state will be able to pay vendors in gold and silver if they want it. No more fluoride in your public water supplies, and much more. Folks, before we go to break, I want to encourage you to get over to 1 Acre Iowa. OneAcreIowa.com. Use the promo code Newman. I just got another box of these today. They are so delicious. They are so wonderful. Regenerative farming, delicious beef. You've got to get a few, folks. Try them out. OneAcreIowa.com. And when you use that promo code Newman, you're going to get a nice little discount there. You can also get a subscription and get an additional discount, 10% off when you get these, folks. Try them. They're amazing. I just had one for breakfast this morning. Also, I want you to get over to classicalconversations.com. Classicalconversations.com. Amazing stuff. I've got my kids enrolled there. I serve as a senior fellow there, and they now have 135,000 students, folks. So there's a reason why so many families are trusting their children's education to this wonderful, wonderful program. And you're going to have a local community right where you're at, no matter where you're at. Stay with us. We're going to be right back here on the Sentinel Report with more from our first guest, Bryan Osborne from Answers in Genesis, talking about the wokeness and the critical race theory that has infested all of our institutions. Stay tuned.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Welcome to the Sentinel Report, guys. Thank you so much for being with us. Our guest today is doing something incredibly important. He's taken on the DEI and the CRT and the whole alphabet soup of acronyms that basically stand for wokeness, which basically stands for rejecting the principles that God's word teaches. Now, as you know, the federal government right now is doing what it can to try to get the DEI and the race nonsense out of our schools. The federal government, under the leadership of the Trump administration, is urging some of the more Democrat states, shall we say, to rein in this kind of wokeness that's happening in the schools. And of course, a lot of it is political, right? People say, well, we don't want the left-wing politics in there. But there's also a biblical component that is probably even more significant than any of the political or ideological issues. And I can't think of anybody better to discuss this with us than our guest today. His name is Bryan Osborne. He's an educator. He's an author. He's actually a speaker for Answers in Genesis. We had Ken Ham on just recently, an incredible leader exposing some of the lies that have so thoroughly saturated our culture. Now, Bryan is, of course, passionate about the gospel. He's an expert in apologetics and evangelism and chronological Bible teaching. And he's got a new book out as well, Woke Injustice, a biblical response to critical race theory. Bryan, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us. What do you make of these efforts to get DEI and the race stuff out of the schools? I mean, is that a good idea, or do the kids need to learn this stuff?
Well, first, it is a privilege to be here with you. Thanks for having me. And you said you had Ken on the other day. Someday you'll recover from that, so we'll pray for you. No, Ken's
No, he's
awesome.
fantastic.
He really is. He's great. And I think it's great that we're seeing this pushback against the DEI initiative, because what many don't realize is that DEI mostly translates to CRT. It's basically the same thing. It's critical race theory applied to our culture with some different words. And so, as we'll see as we flesh this out, critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion, what they really are new ways to practice racism in a new form to shift power from the oppressed to the oppressors by CRT standards, which was based in Marxism. It's a totally anti-biblical worldview. And we'll see that's not a good thing for our culture, but God's principles are, we should say, rooted in those.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into the biblical principles. And I know Answers in Genesis has spent a lot of time teaching on the race issue. And I've actually learned a lot from what you guys have shared. But let's start there. Did God create races? Does it even make sense to be talking about races?
It's so funny. You're dead on. The idea of being racist actually is pretty dumb, because biblically speaking, and that lines up, and this course explains reality, there is just one race, the human race. God made Adam and Eve, and from those first two people comes every person ever. That means we can all trace our family trees back to one man, one woman, Adam and Eve. That means, biblically speaking, and confirmed by real science, there is just one race, the human race. So to be racist is to hate your own race, which is a suicidal ideology, right? And so it's dumb on the face of it. And so, of course, biblically speaking, there is just one race now. Are there different ethnicities? Absolutely. And so we explain that within the biblical worldview, God put inside of Adam and Eve a lot of genetic diversity to produce lots of diversity within mankind over periods of time. But we all go back to Adam and Eve. There is just one race, the human race. And we build our thinking and how we interact with people and how we set policies within that biblical framework.
Yeah, and Brian, as you know, a lot of these people who are pushing the CRT, the critical race theory, and the DEI, I mean, they start with a kernel of truth, right? There were in the past times when people from Europe mistreated people from Africa, and when people from Arabia mistreated people from Europe and from Africa. So there has been historically these issues of racism, quote unquote, if you will. So what is the proper biblical understanding of this? I mean, how do we process it as people who do love justice, as people who do want people to be treated properly and fairly and in a loving way? How do we deal with those things from the past? I mean, what's the proper way to teach those to children?
Yeah, actually, when I get into my book, Woke Injustice, I'll start defining what CRT is and how we should rightly understand it, and if we should use it at all. What I want people to understand is that within a right understanding of history, no one rejects the reality, if they are sane or just want to be truthful, that there have been atrocities in America's past. There's been atrocities throughout human history, but definitely in America's past. We see segregation, Jim Crow laws. We see racism explicitly practiced in our nation. We see racist policies put forth, even the Supreme Court in America's history. There were absolute evil, horrendous atrocities committed in America's history. No doubt about that. My question is CRT the answer? Is critical race theory, which is a neo-Marxist ideology, is it the right tool to use to understand why those things happened, why they're wrong, and what the solution should be for now and for in the future? And the short answer is no, 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 no. Because, as I mentioned, it's a Marxist ideology. It interprets everything wrongly. It gets our identity wrong. It gets our problem wrong. It gets the solution wrong. It starts outside of God's word. Actually views the Bible as part of the problem. And so we don't start with man's ideas. We start with God's word. And within the biblical framework, we can explain why racism is so evil. Because God says that we're all made in God's image, found in Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. The Bible explains why racism is evil because it violates that fundamental tenet that we're made in God's image, and where this evil actually came from back in Genesis chapter 3. Well, man's sin bringing death and suffering and corruption into God's perfect creation. And then based on that, we know that the only solution to racism is a changed heart through the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because at its core, racism is not a skin issue, it is a sin issue. Which is why you see racism throughout human history, way before the idea of whiteness or wokeness ever came onto the scene.
Fascinating. Now, you said something that I want to pick up on. You called CRT a neo-Marxist tool. We had Vodi Bauchman to talk about his book, Fault Lines, and a new one as well. And he did, I think, a good job of kind of putting this into a biblical context. But I want to pick up there.
Sure.
What does it mean that it's a neo-Marxist tool? And why have Marxists and these really totalitarians glommed onto this theory in such a way that it's now being taught in classrooms, that it's now even in some evangelical churches. I mean, how did a neo-Marxist idea end up, for example, getting passed as a resolution in the Southern Baptist? I mean, I know they walked it back, but how did the
Sure.
Southern Baptists end up embracing this as an analytical tool?
Yeah, man, there are so many good questions in that one long question. I'll try to break that down. So first, what is neo-Marxism? You have Vody on, so Vody's incredible. His work on fault lines was just a great seminal work on this issue, which was a great help to me in a lot of ways. But when we say neo-Marxist, we mean a new Marxist idea. So if you trace this back, this is the short version of it. But Marx comes along and says the problem of society is you have those with the haves and those who don't have, the have and the have-nots. Actually, in the Communist Manifesto, he called it the oppressed versus the oppressor, like we see that language so used today. And he actually anticipated that the oppressed, the have-nots, would rise up in opposition against those who have, to take back the resources they were rightly owed, to level the playing field and bring about some sort of Marxist utopia. But he predicted some grand revolution to make this happen. Well, when that did not take place the way he anticipated it would take place, Marxists following Marx began thinking, okay, what went wrong? How can we explain why it didn't really take place? And how can we fix this so the revolution does happen? Fast forward a bit, early 1900s, you get Antonio Gramsci, he's an Italian Marxist. And this guy basically adds to the equation something called hegemony. And he says the reason that the oppressed did not rise up the way we anticipated is because of hegemony. And that is the idea that the oppression is systemic. It's in literally the fabric of society. The oppression is everywhere. That the oppressors have rigged the rules of the game. That way, all of the systems in a society always benefit the oppressors. Now, here's the deal. You just grow up in this system. So the oppressed don't even know they're oppressed. That's why they never rise up in rebellion against the oppression. And so he argued you got to wake them up to their oppression to make them rebel and tear down the systems of power to lead to this Marxist revolution and to get the Marxist utopia ultimately. So he has the idea of hegemony to the equation. And in my book, I give this analogy. If that sounds kind of nebulous, I put it this way. My son Ian, who's now 11, he loves to play games. He loves to make up his own games, and he wants us to play his games with him. But when we play Ian's games with him, guess who always wins? Ian, right? Because it's his game by his rules. Therefore, he always wins. And so that's the idea of hegemony, that the oppressors have rigged it to benefit them. And so that is what he adds to the equation. And so later on comes a Frankfurt School of a famous group of Marxists who kind of polish all this, apply to all society, and they call it critical theory. That comes straight out of a Marxist philosophy. So within critical theory, you put in the middle of those two words, what is the main systemic problem you think in a culture? So you can have critical gender theory, critical class theory, in America with our history, critical race theory. So that's where it comes from. And then really short, I think with Christians, here's what happened. Once you have these ideas that have been taught in our institutions of education for decades now, they've primed the pump. And then certain things happen in our culture. And then Christians want to be empathetic towards those who are suffering, those who are in pain, those who are angry. And so after George Floyd and other instances, Christians start seeing Black Lives Matter. And they start seeing the push that, hey, you know what? You guys, we need to be very empathetic towards those who are struggling with this. And we should care about people. And we do want to have true justice. And what happens is, because of our care for people and our care for justice, we see people using words that we are familiar with. Words like justice, words like equity, words like anti-racism. Now, you may not be familiar with anti-racism, the word itself, but anti, to be against, racism, that's bad. We should be anti-racist. So we think that's got to be a good thing. So those pushing these words, we think, oh, they're on the right side, so we got to jump on with them. Not realizing places like Black Lives Matter, when they use the word justice in a neo-Marxist framework, they don't mean what we mean by justice, right? Yeah. In our worldview, in the biblical framework, justice is right attitudes and actions towards people in line with God's word and who he is. In neo-Marxism and CRT and social justice, it's redistributing power from the oppressors to the oppressed by any means necessary. A totally different definition. But here's the trick. They use similar words, but with a new dictionary, thus Christians get deceived or confused. They jump on the wrong bandwagon and start implementing really bad ideas or policies based on that.
Yep. Well, and I think this would be a really good tool for folks to start combating this perversion of our language and even this misapplication of our empathy, our compassion. Brian, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Yep.
Fascinating book. The book, folks, is Woke Injustice, A Biblical Response to Critical Race Theory. You can get a copy wherever good books are sold. Answers in Genesis has it as well. Brian, thank you again for coming on the program. Thank you for writing this book. We really appreciate it, and I hope we can talk to you again soon.
It's my privilege. Glad to be here, and come back anytime.
Hey, appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back on the other side of this break with more from George Barna.
In 1776, a nation was born, forged in the crucible of revolution. Brave men and women stood together fighting for freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. Introducing Patriot Mobile, the wireless carrier that stands with you. We are committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile. For free activation, use promo code Newman.
Welcome, everybody. Sentinel Report here with your host, Alex Newman, and we have a very special guest joining us. He has been studying the worldview of Americans and even American Christians for a long time. His name is Dr. George Barna. He's at the Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University, and he's got the 2025 data. Unfortunately, it just confirms some of what we knew. Even a lot of the people in our churches, even a lot of the pastors in our churches are not looking at the world through a biblical lens. George, welcome to the program. It's a great honor to have you with us. Talk to us about what you found in your latest data, the latest trends.
Well, Alex, as you may know from reading the reports, what we've got in America is about 4% of adults who have a biblical worldview. When we look at kind of the heartbeat niche of the Christian church in America, people who we call theologically identified born-again Christians, only 11% of them have a biblical worldview. And if we look at the trend line over the last 25 or 30 years, it's been consistently on the decline. We don't see anything that's expecting that to change or causing us to expect that to change. When we look at things generationally, we find that with each succeeding generation, there's a lower proportion of people in that younger generation that have a biblical worldview. And part of the challenge to us is that people's worldview develops before the age of 13. So if we're not paying attention to children, this is what we get when they become adults. So we're at a situation right now where we look at our teenage and our preteen data. They're looking like they're going to emerge into the adult class with somewhere between a 1% to 2% likelihood or incidence of having a biblical worldview.
Yeah, that is scary. And before we wrap today, I definitely want to get your thoughts on how we turn this around, if we can even turn around, if we're too far gone. But I want to ask you first, what do you think is driving this? I mean, how did our churches and our seminaries and our Christian schools fail so badly that now we're in a position where people with a biblical worldview are a minority within a minority, even within our churches? I mean, it's crazy. How did this happen?
Well, I think there are a number of explanations. There's no single thing. As you would find in any war, there's artillery being shot from a lot of different directions. And so what we have is, number one, the culture is influencing the Christian church more than the Christian church is influencing the culture. Secondly, you've got parents who are the ones biblically who are responsible for developing the worldview of their children. They've abandoned that responsibility for more than 40 years now. And they've kind of handed that over. They've abdicated that to the culture. And so what has the biggest influence on worldview development? It's media, whether that's social media, traditional media. Those are constantly sending worldview messages. It's very rare that the most popular media send a biblical message. And so consequently, children are picking up worldly perspectives. And that's why they're embracing this most common worldview, which is called syncretism, which is they just pick and choose elements from many different worldviews because that's what they're being exposed to in the media, many different worldviews. And nobody has told them that which one you pick makes a difference. They believe they're all the same. So what they do is what everybody else is doing, which is picking what's comfortable, what's accessible, and what's popular. Add to that the fact that we've got churches that don't take discipleship seriously. We've made it into a series of programs that a minority of church people engage in, and those programs aren't very effective. But churches don't even know that because they don't measure the effectiveness of what's going on there. And we don't have good criteria for discipleship. Put it all together and it winds up with the mess that we're in today.
Yeah. And I want to drill down a little bit into the syncretism. I think for a lot of people, that's a new word, but I love how you explain it, a fusion of different worldviews. I mean, what does that mean? Are a lot of self-proclaimed American Christians adopting, elements from the pagan worldview, from the Marxist worldview? I mean, what does, say, an average person, I know it's difficult to talk about an average person, but what does an average American look at the world through when it comes to this lens of religious worldview?
Well, essentially what we're doing is we've got a country of 256 million adults. And as we study it, it appears that we've got about 256 million different unique worldviews. Everybody's picking and choosing what seems right, what seems comfortable to them. And so what we found is that the average adult, the typical adult in America, draws from somewhere between 7 to 9 different worldviews. And the mixture of those ideas, those philosophies of life that they're drawing from, uniquely reflects where they're coming from, what their relationships are, what their experiences have been, what information they've received, what kind of life they want to live. And so they embrace those things that make the most sense to them and help them make the most sense of the world based on what makes them feel good.
Yeah. And George, I just want to be really clear here. Is this a salvation issue? I mean, if somebody embraces a little bit of Christianity, but they think their works are going to get them into, I mean, are we talking about a salvation issue here when it comes to the way these people look at the world?
Yeah, I would say not only is it a salvation issue, it's a discipleship issue. And we weren't called just to be saved. We were called to be transformed. And that's what being a disciple is. Being a disciple is you identify your master and you try to imitate the master. So if you want to be a disciple of Jesus, he's the master, and that's who we have to imitate. Your worldview essentially is your combination of core beliefs that result in your lifestyle, your core behaviors. So if you want to be a disciple of Jesus, you have to think like Jesus first so that you can then act like Jesus. That's why worldview is so critical. You can't really be a disciple of Jesus unless you think like him first. And that's why having a biblical worldview is so critical.
Absolutely. Yeah. Romans 12, transforming your mind. And of course, Jesus did call on us to go and make disciples, disciple the nations, not just tell them that they can be saved. This is so important, George. I'm so glad we can have this conversation. We've only got a few minutes left, so I want to spend a little bit of time on solutions. You touched on a couple of them. I want to drill into them a little bit more. Let's start with you mentioned parents, that parents have a responsibility here to disciple their children. And I think a lot of parents are watching saying, no, that's the church's job. We got the youth minister. What does that mean?
It means the parents have to step up to the plate. Now, a lot of parents, in fact, when we look at born-again parents in America, less than 1 out of 10 of them have a biblical worldview. And the problem is you can't give what you don't have. So what would a parent do who doesn't have a biblical worldview, but comes to the realization this is vitally important? Well, what we know is that what they have to do is start someplace. Where would they start? Start with this thing that I talk about called the 7 cornerstones of a biblical worldview. And those are very simple biblical theological perspectives that lead to a Christ-like life. I talk about this in length in a book called Raising Spiritual Champions, which is what parents are called to do, and that's the standard they're going to be held to. So I would say start there with the 7 cornerstones, but recognize that success in life is best defined by being consistently obedient to Christ. And one of those things is you've got to raise your children up to know, love, and serve God with all their heart, mind, strength, and soul. That's what success is going to be in your life. Are you raising up your children to be that kind of person?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, George. And I talk about this a lot on the program, but it's some specific, and before we get to pastors, specific ideas on how parents can do that. I guess, first of all, you got to get yourself a biblical worldview, right? So start there. How do you get yourself a biblical worldview? Second of all, how do you disciple your children and transmit that to the next generation?
Yeah, as I'm saying, the starting point would be those 7 cornerstones of the biblical worldview that will launch you on a trajectory toward developing a more full and complete biblical worldview. Very tough to do when you're an adult, because the first thing you've got to do is get rid of all the stuff that you currently believe. You've got to change the lifestyle that you're currently exhibiting. But once you're on that track, recognize you don't have to be perfect in this. You've only got to be about 10 seconds ahead of your kids. They don't know the difference. And so as long as you can get there first, and then you're willing to do everything you can to share that with them and to live that with them, experience that with them, enjoy that in Christ with them, that's a big deal. A second thing that I would say is critically important here is to recognize that you've got to be measuring how you're doing, because you get what you measure. So if you measure the wrong stuff, you're going to get the wrong stuff. But if you're measuring the things that Jesus died for, not the things that the world applauds, that's going to change the equation as well. And so those are important things that you can pursue. Recognize that, yeah, we can turn around the culture, but it's got to be intentional. It's got to be strategic. And we're really talking about building a discipleship culture. And in order to do that, you have to be a disciple, and then realize that the only people that can make disciples are disciples. Why? Because you reproduce who you are. And so if you want to reproduce disciples, you've got to be one first. But then if you're going to be involved in that capacity, that activity, that lifestyle, that new culture, well, what that means is you've got to start by building relationships with people. You've got to invest time in them. They've got to trust you. And then it's not about beating them over the head with the Bible. It's about asking them questions about what they believe and having those kind of Socratic dialogues where people can start to question themselves, question their own beliefs, question their own behaviors. They're not going to change simply because you tell them that biblically speaking, they're wrong. They're going to change because they've come to that conclusion. They own that process and they own those outcomes, and they want to become a disciple.
Amen. And pastors, elders, I mean, let's say a pastor's watching this right now and is feeling really convicted. Oh man, we have not put nearly enough time into discipleship. Gonna have a meeting with the elders this weekend. What do we do?
Well, let's start by acknowledging that only 37% of pastors in America have a biblical worldview. So they've got to get on this same track as everybody else and make sure that they're in the right place spiritually, so that whatever it is that they're reproducing is going to be something that really honors God and advances his kingdom. Part of the problem we have in America today is pastors stand in the pulpit and say, essentially, go out and reproduce yourself. And then when people do that, we're shocked when the church doesn't look at all like the kingdom of God, doesn't look at all like what Christ died for. How could that be? They're out there reproducing themselves. Yeah, but they're not really disciples of Jesus. So they're producing disciples of the world, which is what they are. And then we're shocked. So we've got to stop that. And part of it, too, is that pastors need to recognize, I would say, that if we're going to build disciples, we start with children. What we do in our churches today is we focus almost entirely on adults. Most of our budget goes there. Most of our staffing goes there. Most of our programs are for adults. The preaching is to adults. We put all our eggs in the adult basket. It's too late. Adults basically don't change unless they have a serious crisis in their life that challenges everything they thought and believed and do. Well, we can't wait for that. The better strategy is to go where that worldview is developing. That's with children under the age of 13. And so put most of our resources, most of our time and energy and money and programming and space, everything that we've got, pour it into children. The world is doing that. They're doing it with advertising. They're doing it with education. They're doing it with everything, every resource that they have, because they know the same phrase that Hitler and Mussolini and Mao Zedong and a bunch of Stalin and others used. Give me a child until, and they use different ages, but they basically say, give me a child until they're 9 and I'll rule the world. Because we know that, yes, once you implant in their mind and then that goes to their heart, what to really believe and how to really live, it's not going to change as they get older. All they're going to try to do is figure out, how do I become more sophisticated in being that kind of person? The church needs to get there with the gospel and the truths of Scripture before a child reaches the age of 13. If we can do that, we will rule the world through Christ, for Christ.
Amen. And you look a lot at the trends, and I know they don't look good right now. Are you hopeful that this can be turned around, or is America inevitably headed for huge problems?
Look, we've created our own grave here, and we're inviting ourselves to jump in it, but we don't have to. We can make a different pathway. And you know, when you look biblically at how God transforms a culture, he never waits until he has a majority. He always used what the scriptures call a remnant of people who are sold out to him. And when you study cultural transformation in the Bible, what you find is that he'll have a whole group of people, that remnant, they're a small minority. But then when he goes to change the culture, he takes even just a small proportion of that small proportion. He doesn't need a lot of people. He just needs the right people. Do we have them in America? Yes, we do. But our problem is that we've been so distracted by all the things of the world, and we don't have churches that are focusing us on the things that really matter. But do we have the people? Yes. Now we've got to get the focus and get busy.
Amen. You've got a lot of resources, Dr. Barna. Raising Spiritual Champions is your book. That's available wherever good books are sold. People can find more about you at georgebarna.com. And, of course, your latest report, American Worldview Inventory 2025, a national study for strengthening the worldview of Americans. I hope people will get a copy of that. How else can people follow and support your work, Dr. Barna?
The other place they can go is to culturalresearchcenter.com. That's the research center at Arizona Christian University where I work, and that's where we do all the research that we're doing. And so there's a lot that's available there for free as well.
Folks, go get some of this stuff. I'm telling you, share it with your pastor, share it with your elders, and more importantly, share it with your children, okay? We've got a major crisis, as you will see as soon as you take a look at these numbers. Dr. Barna, thank you so much for doing the work that you do, and thank you very much for joining us today. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it. All right, folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back on the other side of this break with Hannah Faulkner, a young lady who's at the tip of the spear when it comes to exposing evildoers and defending truth and righteousness. We'll be right back.
We're living in World War III, an all-out attack against the Christian church, the Christian faith, and families everywhere. With over 80% of professing Christian teens abandoning the faith by their early 20s, it's clear we're in a spiritual battle for our very lives, and those of every generation after us. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people perish from lack of knowledge." That's why GTI created our new You Are What You Think Biblical Worldview package, combining short video teachings along with textbooks, all designed to equip you and your family to discern the good ideas from the evil. Enjoy vibrant discussions over the critical issues of the day using the Bible as your guide. Go to gtimin.com, click the blue banner at the top, and enter the coupon code Newman at the checkout to receive this powerful series for only $99. That's gtimin.com, click the banner at the top, and enter the coupon code Newman at the checkout. Or purchase it directly from libertysentinel.org.
Welcome to the Sentinel Report. Alex Newman, your host here, folks. We've got a very special young lady joining us today to talk about some really important issues. I met her at one of the Reawaken America events we had in North Carolina. and was just blown away. Like, she's 17, and yet she's better educated than the vast majority of American adults. It's really, really encouraging that at least some young people have slipped through the cracks of indoctrination, brainwashing, dumbing down social or anti-social media, as the case may be. And there's just so much here to discuss, and maybe some pointers out there for parents and grandparents. Like, how do you raise up children in this environment and not have them get sucked into this vile cesspool of what we very euphemistically, I think, call culture. Hannah, she's 17. She's actually a university senior. She's the host of the Hannah Faulkner Show. She's the founder of Culture of 1776, also author of the new book, Last Chance to Save Our Republic, written by the great General Michael Flynn. Hannah, welcome to the program. It's so great to have you. I want to start with the porn and the perversion in our schools. You thankfully were homeschooled, so I think you were spared a lot of that horror, but it's still there, right? I mean, Trump's in office. He's telling these people to cut it out, and it's still there, and they're fighting back. They're calling it censorship. What do we make of this?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I was homeschooled. I went to kindergarten. That was the only time that I spent in public school here in the so-called conservative state of Tennessee. Unfortunately, we have far too many rhinos, Republican in name only, that I'd even go as far to say that these people are communist. They are America last. They are not Christians. They'll call themselves conservative Christians all day long, but that's the only way they're going to be voted in here in the state of Tennessee. But the reason that we're here is because Christians have been extremely apathetic and complacent to these issues, thanking God that we're not like California, Oregon, or some liberal state, when in reality, this stuff is happening worse behind the scenes, and we just aren't paying attention to it. I mean, I get messages all the time from people that move from California to Rutherford County, Tennessee, and call me up and they say, Hannah, I am appalled by the books that my children are bringing home from these elementary, middle, and high schools here in Tennessee. It is worse than California, because at least in California and these liberal states, the Democrats just come out and tell them exactly what they stand on and what they believe in. Rather, here in the conservative state, they lie to us. They tell us they're conservative Christians, and in the same day, will vote to keep pornographic and explicit books in the library. But here's my message: is number one, obviously, this is a spiritual warfare that we're fighting, good versus evil, moral versus evil. And no sane and no healthy society is any kind of politician, any kind of leader, even having the discussion that you should be able to chop off your healthy breasts and genitals, or that you can become the opposite sex. And this is when you know that you have reached a point in society and culture where its people have completely rejected a level of common sense, moral standards. And so, as you talk about these books, I mean, it's infiltrated all of our libraries here in Tennessee. Thankfully, we've got some school board members that are solid Christian conservatives that are making their voices heard, that aren't afraid of lawsuits or people coming against them, and they're speaking up. But here's the thing: is that in 1963, a woman by the name of Patricia Nordman, she was speaking in front of Congress in 1963, warning them about the current communist goals in America. And the 25th goal, as I'm sure you know, is to convince the public that the censorship of obscene material and pornographic content is a violation of the First Amendment and censoring one's speech. This is not censoring one's speech. This is called protecting children's innocence. And it goes back to the fact that in no sane and no healthy and in no moral society should we even be having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, I think of Ephesians chapter 5, which has been my motto in journalism, to have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather to reprove them. And then some of these things are so shameful, they shouldn't even be talked about. And I feel like that's so much of what's happening today. Last week, we reported on this vile book here in Florida, the conservative bastion of Florida. They had this nasty, it was so gross, we couldn't even play the excerpt of the mom reading it because it was, I mean, it involved human murder and weird sex stuff and cannibalism. I mean, just so vile. And these are for elementary school students. You don't even know what to make of it. But that speaks to a broader issue, Hannah, that I wanted to talk to you about, and that is the issue of sexual morality. I mean, we see now families crumbling. We see fornication exploding. We see this feminism, this ideology that I think is being used by communists and other evildoers to destroy the family. Talk to us about the trend lines that you see, where this is all going, and how we might pull back from the brink.
Yeah, well, I mean, just as you know, and most of your listeners, I'm sure, know, is that throughout any communist country, throughout any society where these dictators, these communists, these tyrannical leaders want to destroy their nation, they start with breaking down the family. And how do you break down the family? Well, by confusing male and female roles in society. And I believe the feminist movement has been arguably the greatest threat to the family unit here in America. I mean, you've seen throughout history, nations and dictators will use movements such as free love or liberation movements, which is what they used through the feminist movement, promising women that they will have more rights and that in order for them to be truly free or no longer oppressed, they need to sleep around or do whatever they want with whoever they want, and they need to get a job and move out of the home and not make family a priority, which now we see in 2025, where this generation of women is the most depressed, the most suicidal, and the most anxiety ridden generation. And I saw the other day that it said by 2030, if we continue the path we're on, 45% of women ages 25 to 44 will be unmarried and childless. So this has been a very strategic goal. I mean, it collapsed the family to control society. You look at God's first commandment to mankind in Genesis 1:28, go therefore and multiply, have a bunch of children with your husband and your wife in a commitment and a committed marriage. That was the first commandment to mankind that God gave us. And here you look at the left, even some of the Republicans, many of the things that they stand on are directly, diametrically opposed to God's first commandment to mankind. You look at climate change, it's all about population control. These vaccines, population control. The abortion, birth control, open borders. I mean, that is like the one of the fastest ways to destroy a nation is to have open borders. So all of this is extremely strategic. But you mentioned, I mean, just this the breakdown, how it even got to the point where now we've got men and women's sports. We've got people, obsessing over pedophiles and defending them to their grave. And it starts with normalizing promiscuity. It starts with normalizing things like the Playboy magazine, normalizing sex outside of marriage, and then opening up the doors for easy divorce. People can get divorced. There's no commitment. It's just, whatever you want to do. Then starting to normalize homosexuality, then transgenderism. And now people wonder, how in the world do we have men and women's sports? Well, because of the feminist movement. And I tell people all the time, it's almost as an oxymoron to claim to be a feminist against men and women's sports when feminism is what has caused men and women's sports today. Because if you look at the 80s and 90s, the feminist movement alongside Planned Parenthood was pushing this notion that there's no difference between male and female. It's just a social construct. So if there's no difference between male and female, then why does it matter that they're in our spaces? So very strategic. If you do a quick research study, we will know that when you give an inch into sin, just like you were saying out of Ephesians 5, when you give an inch of sin, our enemy Satan, he'll take miles. And now today in 2025, the most researched type of pornography is incest. So what's next? I think your audience can answer that for themselves.
It's so vile, and we got people identifying as cats and tortoises, and Romans 1 comes to mind. Oh man, it's so bad. Hannah, on a separate subject, but obviously related, we're seeing an increase in violence. It's almost like we're seeing the beginnings of a revolution with the attacks on Tesla and the crazy political leaders calling for uprisings and attacking conservatives. We see now the attacks on the cars and the car dealerships because they're associated with a guy who's working with Donald Trump. How dangerous is this? Do you think we could be headed toward kind of civil unrest or worse?
Yeah, I mean, this is a 100% a national security threat to any American with half a brain that's thinking and paying attention to what's happening in our country. I mean, these people are completely unhinged. They need to be put behind bars for a very long time for the things that they're doing. And it's not just, I mean, you see the swatting. There's a swatting epidemic happening across our country to conservative influencers that are speaking the truth, that are not afraid to speak the truth, and they're being swatted. And I truly believe I want to see accountability because we can call for these people, we can expose the JFK files, we can lay out all of this information, but until these people are truly held accountable, put behind bars, and many of them need to be executed. And in my opinion, Dr. Anthony Fauci, I mean, the blood of billions of individuals across the world for lying to the American people, manipulating them with a very strategic agenda. Again, like I said earlier, these people need to be put behind bars. They have committed treason against the American people. But you look at these rioters, and this is where it is. I mean, this is what just lays out for the American people very clearly is that the left does not care about safety. They do not care about protecting the American people because where have their calls been against these Tesla rioters? Actually, Tim Walz over Minnesota said that he didn't even say anything about it. He actually was celebrating the violence against Elon Musk vehicles and electric vehicles because he thinks it is deserved. You saw when the United Healthcare CEO was assassinated in New York, Taylor Lorenz, an editor at the Washington Post, said on Piers Morgan's show that she was joyed by this death because it would teach the American people something. Same thing when President Trump was almost assassinated in Butler, Pennsylvania. The left said nothing about gun control. This is more than just gun control and taking away our guns. They are an anti-self-defense movement. They do not want us to be able to prevent a tyrannical government from going in and infringing upon our rights. And that's exactly what the left is proving to us today. The Democratic Party as a whole is that they do not care about safety and they do not care about the truth.
Amen. And the last time I saw you in public, we were in North Carolina at the Reawaken America event, and you were just about to release your book. It is now out, folks. You need to go get a copy of this. It's called "Last Chance to Save Our Republic." Even just the title is awesome, right? So few of our young people today even realize we live in a republic, even though at one time they pledged allegiance to the republic. But talk to us about the book. Why do you say "last chance," and what do we need to do as Americans if we hope to preserve our republic, our freedoms for the next generation?
That's right. Yeah. Well, November 5th, I mean, the Lord really had shed mercy on this nation. We did not deserve President Trump to be able to win that election. We did not deserve his mercy. I mean, the fact that we had Joe Biden as president, an incompetent leader who couldn't even read it off a teleprompter without slurring his words, the fact that we had him as a president for the last 4 years, which obviously we know he was not the commander in chief, but regardless, the fact that we had him deemed as commander in chief shows that God's judgment was on this nation. I mean, we have allowed millions upon millions of babies to be murdered in its mother's womb in the United States of America. We have allowed children to be mutilated, their genitals, we have allowed them to be chemically castrated, to be sterilized as young children. We have allowed some of the most egregious, like you said, vile things to permeate every single institution and facet of our society. And so we do deserve God's judgment. May God, he showed us mercy on November 5th. And I, coincidentally, literally came out with a book a couple months after the election saying that this might just be our last chance to save this republic. We have not asked enough questions. I mean, the reason why we're here is because we've rejected God, we've rejected common sense moral standards, but we've also allowed the family unit to completely be decimated by these globalist oligarchs. And so in the book, I break down the history of this nation, why we left England in the first place, why we are a constitutional republic, why we're not a democracy, something that many of our politicians, even Republicans, don't seem to understand and continue to say that we are a democracy. We move into the First Amendment, freedom of speech, religious liberty, which is one of the main reasons why we came over from England, is to get away from a state-sponsored religion. I break down the gender ideology movement, Alfred Kinsey, John Money, abortion, Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, the breakdown of the family, which I deem as the greatest issue facing our country, because if you don't have strong families, you're not going to have a strong nation. So that's a little bit about the book. I mean, it gets deep, and I'll tell you this right now. People have asked me, Hannah, are you going to do an audiobook for the book? And I right now at this time, because it is so deep, because of these topics that have to be discussed today, I list the information that the left uses in their own terminology. Like you said, the most vile things. I put it in the book. And so I encourage people to use discretion, use parental discretion when buying this for your teenagers. I mean, read it for yourself. But the reason why I haven't done an audiobook just yet is because it's deep. It is not a fun, cheery book. This is deep stuff. It's research, and it's the reality of what's happening in this country. And if we do not take a stand, it really might be just our last chance.
Yeah, I agree with you on every single point, Hannah. I do think, and a lot of people are going back to sleep now. Oh, Trump's in the White House. We're good. Everything's good. No, folks, we're this close to destruction, and we may have a little reprieve right now. We got another election coming up in 2028, and then another one after that. So we've got a lot of work to do. Hannah, it's so encouraging to talk to a young person who gets it, who has not been brainwashed by the zombies. Before we let you go, talk to the folks out there. Just give parents and grandparents some advice on how to raise up young people who will know the Lord, who will care about these important issues, who won't be sucked into the death cult that is destroying our society.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, I just want to say this real quick. You talk about President Trump, like this is not over. I mean, you look at Larry Ellison, the $500 billion investment to AI, and Larry Ellison's companies. I mean, Larry Ellison, as you know, he is a tyrannical individual. I mean, he is a globalist. He is full on for a full digital track and trace surveillance of American citizens. So very dangerous. We've got to hold President Trump accountable for his actions on that. But also, I mean, the fact that we have no reporters in the press room asking about the slaughtering of countless Christians across our world right now is pretty sickening, that there is not a single reporter, even conservatives, asking what President Trump's response is and how he'll protect Americans. God forbid that ends up happening here in the United States of America, where they're being slaughtered in front of their houses by these Islamic terrorists. But to parents, I mean, teach your kids the why behind the what. Bring them to school board meetings. Bring them to city council meetings. So often I show up to these events and there's no children. There's no grandkids. And I know these people have kids. I know they have grandchildren. Bring them to these events, because we cannot expect the next generations to get involved unless they see with their own eyes that you, the parent, that you, the grandparent, care about the truth and are going to defend their freedoms and liberties to your grave. So involve them, teach them the why behind the what, get involved in a church, a community, surround them with like-minded people. I mean, it says clearly in Proverbs that bad company ruins good morals. So surround your kids with good, solid Christian leaders. Involve them in adult conversations. I mean, that's one of the best ways they can learn about life and politics and religion is involving them in these adult conversations, obviously that are age appropriate, but involve them, teach them the why behind the what, and don't back down.
Yeah, I love it. Hannah, your show, the Hannah Faulkner Show, people can find that anywhere good shows are, including Rumble and other places. The book, Last Chance to Save Our Republic, is available anywhere good books are sold. How else can people follow you?
Yeah, my Instagram is Hannah Faulkner 1776. My website's cultureof1776.com. And then my X page is Hannah F 1776.
Fantastic. Hannah, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope we can talk to you again very soon.
Absolutely. God bless you.
God bless you too. All right, folks, that is all we have time for today here on the Sentinel Report. But I want to thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all that you do for God and our country and the next generation. We've got to stay involved. Now is not the time to go back to sleep. Really appreciate you tuning in. Get over to our website, libertysentinel.org, libertysentinel.org. You can sign up for the free newsletter and so much more. Until next time, thanks for watching or listening, and God bless you all.